Have you ever brushed off a strange feeling in your body, telling yourself, oh, it's just age? Maybe your arm felt a little weaker than usual, or you had a brief dizzy spell that went away after a minute. At our age, it's easy to dismiss those things as part of getting older. But sometimes, those little signs are actually your body waving a red flag, asking you to pay attention. And one of the most dangerous conditions where this happens is a stroke. Now, I know the word stroke can sound scary. Most of us think of it as something that happens suddenly and dramatically, like someone collapsing or losing the ability to speak right away. But here's the surprising truth: strokes often give us quiet warnings first. These warnings can be subtle, easy to overlook, and yet, catching them early could make all the difference in protecting your brain, your independence, and your life. That's why today, we're talking about 7 silent signs of a stroke that many people over 60 ignore. And before you think, well, I'm healthy, I don't need to worry, let me tell you, strokes don't always give advance notice. Even people who eat well, exercise, and feel strong can experience one. But here's the good news: by knowing what to watch for, you give yourself power. You give yourself a chance to act quickly, and that could mean recovering fully instead of living with long-term disability. So, let's start with one of the most common and yet most overlooked signals. Imagine you're sitting in your chair, maybe reading the paper or watching TV, and suddenly you notice that your hand feels clumsy. You try to pick up a cup of tea, and it slips. Or your arm just feels weaker than the other. Maybe it's not dramatic, your arm isn't paralyzed, but it feels heavy, uncoordinated, not quite right. Many people chalk this up to arthritis or fatigue, but weakness or numbness in an arm or a leg, especially on just one side of the body, is a classic silent sign of a stroke. Even if it lasts only a few minutes and then goes away, that's what doctors call a mini-stroke, or TIA, which is your body's way of warning you that a bigger stroke could be coming. Ignoring it is like ignoring a smoke alarm when the batteries are still working. It's there to save you. Another signal that often sneaks past people is changes in vision. Maybe you notice that one eye feels blurry, or that you're suddenly seeing double. You might even have a brief moment where part of your vision seems missing, like someone pulled a curtain over part of your sight. Our first instinct is to blame our glasses, cataracts, or just getting older. But sudden vision problems, especially if they appear out of nowhere, can be a sign that blood flow to your brain is being disrupted. The eyes are closely connected to the brain, so any unexpected change is worth taking seriously. And then there's dizziness. I'm not talking about the kind of dizziness you feel if you stand up too quickly after sitting for a while. That's pretty normal. I'm talking about sudden, unexplained dizziness or loss of balance. Imagine you're walking through the kitchen and suddenly the floor feels like it's tilting. You have to grab onto the counter just to steady yourself. Sometimes people laugh it off and say, oh, I must be tired, but balance problems that come out of nowhere can be your brain telling you something isn't right. Strokes often affect the part of the brain that controls coordination, so if you feel dizzy or find it hard to walk straight, it's a red flag you shouldn't ignore. What makes these signs tricky is how ordinary they can seem. Weakness, blurry vision, dizziness, they're all things that can happen in everyday life for reasons that aren't dangerous. But here's the key difference: when these things come on suddenly, without warning, and feel unusual for you, that's when you need to pay attention. I've heard stories from people who brushed off these signals. One woman said her left hand kept feeling asleep on and off, and she thought it was just poor circulation. A few weeks later, she had a major stroke that left her unable to use that hand at all. Another man ignored his sudden dizziness, thinking he was just dehydrated. The next day, he collapsed and ended up in the hospital. In both cases, if they had gone to the doctor right away, there might have been a chance to prevent the worst outcome. The hard truth is that strokes don't wait until it's convenient for us. They don't come with flashing lights or loud sirens. They whisper first. And if we're not listening, we risk losing precious time. Doctors say that when it comes to stroke, time lost is brain lost. Every minute matters. That's why recognizing these early signs can give you such an advantage. If your arm suddenly feels weak, if your vision suddenly changes, if you suddenly feel dizzy or unsteady, don't wait to see if it goes away. Call for help immediately. Even if it does pass after a few minutes, that doesn't mean you're fine. It means you've been given a second chance to act before something more serious happens. I know it's tempting to tough it out, to say, I don't want to bother anyone, or I'll see how I feel tomorrow. Many of us grew up with that mindset: don't complain, don't make a fuss. But this is one situation where speaking up, even if it turns out to be nothing, could save your life. It's far better to have a doctor tell you, you're fine, it was just a scare, than to wait and face the consequences of a full-blown stroke. So as we move forward, keep this in mind: the body is wise, and it often gives us little warnings before something major happens. Our job is to listen, to respect those warnings, and to take action. We've already talked about weakness in the arm or leg, sudden changes in vision, and unexplained dizziness. These are three of the silent signals that many people overlook, but they can mean everything. If you're still watching and feel that these insights are meaningful, please type number 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I warmly invite you to do so, and don't forget to turn on the bell, so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos designed to uplift, inform, and inspire. Your support truly means a lot. It's what keeps us going and allows us to continue sharing thoughtful, helpful content just for you. Now, let's continue this journey together. Sometimes the warnings a stroke gives us aren't physical in the way we'd expect. They can show up in our ability to think, to speak, or even just to feel like ourselves. And because these changes can be so subtle, it's easy to brush them off or blame them on stress, tiredness, or even just a bad day. But in truth, these are some of the most powerful signals that your brain may be in danger. One of the clearest examples is trouble speaking. Imagine you're sitting at the breakfast table, chatting with your spouse or a friend on the phone, and suddenly you can't find the words you want to say. Or the words come out slurred, like your mouth won't cooperate. Maybe you know exactly what you want to say in your head, but it feels like there's a wall between your thoughts and your speech. For some people, it's not slurring, it's mixing up words, like saying table when you mean chair. Now, this can feel embarrassing, so people often laugh it off or quickly change the subject. But when speech suddenly becomes difficult, that's a major warning sign. The part of your brain that controls language is very sensitive to blood flow. If something interrupts that flow, even briefly, it can affect how clearly you speak. And ignoring it could mean missing a chance to prevent something far more serious. Closely tied to that is another silent signal: sudden confusion or trouble understanding others. Have you ever had someone talk to you and, for a split second, it felt like they were speaking a foreign language? You hear the words, but your brain just can't put them together into meaning. Or maybe you're reading a sentence in a book or on the TV screen, and the words blur together in a way that doesn't make sense. It's easy to think, oh, my mind was wandering, or I'm just tired. But sudden problems with comprehension are more than ordinary forgetfulness. They're a sign that part of your brain isn't working the way it should, and that can be another red flag for stroke. I remember hearing about a man in his 70s who suddenly had trouble following conversations at his daughter's birthday party. He thought people were mumbling, but in reality, his brain wasn't processing the words correctly. His family noticed and urged him to see a doctor, and thank goodness they did. It turned out he had experienced a mini-stroke. By acting quickly, he was able to get treatment that reduced his risk of having a major one later. And then there's one that often slips under the radar: sudden, severe headaches. Now, many people over 60 don't often think of headaches as a stroke symptom. They associate strokes with weakness or speech problems. But for some types of strokes, especially those involving bleeding in the brain, a headache can be the very first and strongest warning. We're not talking about the usual tension headache you might get from skipping a meal or a little dehydration. This is the kind of headache that comes on like a lightning bolt. It's intense, it's sudden, and it doesn't feel like the headaches you've had before. Some people describe it as the worst headache of their life. When that happens, it's critical to take it seriously, even if you've never had issues with headaches before. It's so important to remember that our brains aren't designed to hurt. So, if your head suddenly feels like it's in a vice or pounding out of nowhere, that's your body's way of waving a giant warning flag. All of these signals, difficulty speaking, confusion with language, and sudden severe headaches, remind us of something essential: strokes don't always follow the rules we expect. They don't always fit neatly into the dramatic pictures we see on TV. Sometimes they whisper through our words, our thoughts, or a sharp pain in our head that feels out of place. The reason so many people ignore these signs is that they pass. You might struggle to speak for a minute, and then everything feels normal again. Or you might feel confused, then shake it off and go back to your day. But those moments are like tremors before an earthquake. They're warning us that the ground isn't stable. And when it comes to your brain, even one small episode is enough reason to act. Doctors say that after a mini stroke, the risk of a major stroke is highest in the next few days. That means that the very moment you're tempted to downplay what happened is the moment you need to pick up the phone and call for help. I know it isn't always easy. None of us like the idea of going to the hospital and waiting in the emergency room, especially if the symptoms go away and we feel fine again. But every second matters with strokes. Quick action can mean getting the right medication to prevent clots, or getting imaging that reveals a problem before it turns life-threatening. Think about it this way: if your car started making a strange noise, you wouldn't wait until it broke down completely before taking it to a mechanic. You'd check it right away, because you know catching a problem early can save you from being stranded on the side of the road. Your brain is far more valuable than any car, and it deserves the same urgent attention. What I hope you take from this is that speaking struggles, confusion, and sudden headaches aren't things to laugh off or minimize. They're your body's way of asking you to stop and listen. We've now seen how stroke warnings can show up in the body, like weakness or dizziness, and also in the mind, like trouble with language or sudden pain. Both are equally important, and both deserve your full attention. As we've been uncovering these hidden warnings, it becomes clear that a stroke isn't always the dramatic collapse people imagine. Sometimes, the body whispers instead of shouting, and it's in those whispers that we can find the chance to act in time. There are still a couple of silent signals left that deserve just as much attention, because they too can slip through the cracks if we're not paying close attention. One of the most surprising warning signs is sudden fatigue or mental fog. Now, we all know what it feels like to be tired. That's part of life. Maybe you didn't sleep well the night before, or you had a busy day running errands. But the fatigue I'm talking about here is different. It comes on quickly, without reason, and it feels heavier than normal. You might suddenly feel drained, like someone pulled the plug on your energy. Or your brain may feel cloudy, like you can't focus or think clearly. Some people describe it as hitting a wall, where their body and mind both seem to shut down at once. This kind of overwhelming fatigue is more than just needing a nap. It's your brain struggling to function properly, and that can be another early warning of a stroke. It's easy to dismiss, especially if you're over 60, because tiredness is common. But if it's sudden, severe, and doesn't match your normal pattern, it's a signal you shouldn't ignore. Another silent sign is sudden numbness or tingling, especially in the face. Have you ever felt like your cheek went a little numb, almost like you'd just been to the dentist? Or maybe your lips felt tingly, or one side of your mouth drooped slightly when you smiled. These subtle changes are incredibly important, because they show us that the nerves controlling those muscles aren't getting the signals they need from the brain. Sometimes the numbness lasts only a few minutes, and then it goes away, which is why so many people brush it off. They'll say, "Oh, I must have slept funny on my arm," or "maybe my circulation isn't great today." But when numbness or tingling comes on suddenly, especially on one side of the face or body, it's one of the clearest red flags of a stroke. Even if it vanishes after a short time, it's still a sign that blood flow to the brain was interrupted, and it's time to take it seriously. So now, when we put all of this together, we can see the bigger picture. A stroke doesn't always arrive like a thunderclap with every symptom showing at once. It might begin with a heavy arm, or a strange blur in your vision. It could be a dizzy spell, or your words stumbling on the way out. It might be a sudden headache that feels out of character, or a wave of exhaustion that sweeps over you out of nowhere. And sometimes it's the tiniest detail, like the way your smile doesn't look quite right in the mirror, that can tell the whole story. The challenge, of course, is that all of these things can also happen for other reasons. That's what makes them so easy to ignore. But here's the mindset that can save your life. It's always better to be cautious. It's always better to check and discover it was nothing than to wait and find out too late that it was something. Doctors often use the phrase time is brain. What they mean is that every minute a stroke goes untreated, brain cells are being damaged. The faster you respond, the more of yourself you protect, your ability to speak, to move, to think, and to live the way you want. And after 60, when independence becomes something we value more than ever, protecting those abilities is priceless. I know how easy it is to hesitate. You don't want to bother anyone, or you convince yourself it'll pass. But I want you to remember this: asking for help is not weakness. It's strength. It's you saying, my health matters. My life matters. And it does. You matter, to your family, your friends, and to yourself. Think of it this way. Every time you recognize one of these silent signs and act, you're giving yourself the best chance at more years of laughter, of morning coffees, of conversations with people you love. You're giving yourself more time to live fully. And isn't that worth a trip to the hospital, even if it turns out to be nothing? Absolutely. So let's quickly bring this together. The silent signs we've talked about include sudden weakness in the arm or leg, vision changes, dizziness or loss of balance, trouble speaking or understanding, sudden headaches, unexplained fatigue or mental fog, and numbness or tingling in the face or body. Each one on its own may seem small, but together they paint a clear picture. Your brain is asking for help. My encouragement to you is simple: listen. Don't brush it off. Don't wait. Take action. Because while we can't always prevent strokes, we can give ourselves the best chance to survive and recover by responding quickly. And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Growing older doesn't mean losing control over your health. It means becoming wiser about how you protect it. Paying attention to your body's signals and acting on them is one of the most powerful ways to take charge of your future. If this message resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced one of these silent signs, or known someone who has? Share your story in the comments. It might just help someone else recognize a warning in their own life. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe for more tips on living strong, healthy, and independent at every age. Here's to staying alert, staying safe, and living your best life, because every moment you protect your health is another moment you get to enjoy the life you've built.